Hello, grade 8s. Welcome back to MV Tutors. I'm Tolo, and I thought let's jump a little bit to term 3's topic of common fractions. All right, so we're going to have a look at this because I understand that you guys are going to write your first term test soon, and common fractions are a part of it. So let's just look at that topic and then we'll go back to term 1 things. Okay, so what is a common fraction? Or what is a fraction? A fraction is a part of a whole, all right? Whenever I think of fractions, I think of a slab of chocolate. I have a sweet tooth and I love me some chocolate. And that is how fractions were introduced to me when I was in grade 3. I was in a school and the class teacher used the chocolate example. So here we have our chocolate and our slab and this slab has 8 pieces, all right? So 8 pieces as part of 8, that gives us one whole of a chocolate. If I were to take one piece, I just took 1/8 of the chocolate, all right? If I said I wanted half the chocolate, I can see that that half is right there, right? So that would have to be 4/8, which can be simplified to a half. Okay, so that's basically what fractions are. A fraction is a part of a whole. Okay, this is the whole, and one piece of it is just a part of the whole. And a common fraction is written in the form x over y. Remember x, y, z, and all the other letters, they are just variables. It's just, we don't know what the exact value is, so for now we're just going to use variables. So a common fraction is written in the form x over y. All right, where x would be your numerator. It's quite important. We're going to use those terms a lot, numerator. And y is your denominator. All right, now fractions are nothing to be scared of. As long as you know how to work with them, things will be okay. All right. I know, like I said, when starting creating this content, that even matrics up until this point some of them cannot perform calculations involving fractions. Okay, they forget. So I hope that during this lesson, you will catch it, grab it, run with it. Okay, and that you never forget. Okay, so let's start with the first lesson, which is equivalent fractions. What are those? So equivalent fractions are fractions that have the same value. All right, so in order to get an equivalent fraction of a fraction, we multiplied with a fraction that has a numerator the same as the denominator. Okay, what do I mean? I said a lot of things and I'm sure some of you are like, what? Let's just go to examples and then we'll get back to the definition. So, for example, let's say I have 3/7 and I decide to take my fraction, okay, and then I multiply it with a number or a fraction that has the same numerator as well as a denominator. Okay, so basically 3 times 10 would be 30 and 7 times 10 would be 70. Okay, so let's go back to the definition. In order to get an equivalent fraction of a fraction, we multiply it with a fraction that has a numerator the same as the denominator. Okay, so we multiplied that fraction. Okay, an equivalent fraction of a fraction is we take that fraction and we multiply it with a fraction that has a numerator the same as a denominator. All right, so we can multiply it by 10/10. This is simply multiplying it by 1, okay, because 10/10 is just 1. All right, yeah, so you have 30/70. And what if we then take 3/7 and we multiply it by 100/100? Okay, that'll simply be 300/700. We can also just simplify it. Okay, when you simplify it, it will go back to 3/7 when you divide by 100/100. All right, But yes, so that's an equivalent fraction. Let's also take the same fraction, 3 over 7. Let's multiply it by, let's say, 2 over 2. Okay. In essence, we are multiplying it with 1. 10 over 10 is 1. 100 over 100 is 1. 2 over 2 is 1. Okay. But that's an equivalent fraction. So 3 times 2, that would give you 6. 7 times 2, that would give you 14. Okay. So that is an equivalent fraction. Now let's go to simplifying common fractions. Okay, so once you actually have your equivalent fraction, like I said, you can take it back to a simplified common fraction. Okay, if you divide by 10 in the numerator and you divide by 10 in the denominator, you're going to get back to 3 over 7. That is what you normally do when you simplify. But let's get there. So simplifying common fractions, we simplify a fraction by dividing both the numerator and the denominator by their highest common factor. So in the previous examples where we were doing equivalent fractions, the highest common factor there for the first example was 10. The highest common factor for the second example would have been 100. The highest common factor for the third example would have been 2. Okay. So now, let's see. Can we simplify this? Remember how to get the highest common factor? What are the factors for 6? Okay, we have 1 and 6. We have 2 and 3. All right. What are the factors of 20? We have 1 and 20. We have 2 and 10. 3 is not a factor. We have 4 and 5. 6, no. 7, no. 8, no. 9, 10. Yes, we're back to square one. So basically, the factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. What are the factors of 20? We have 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, and 20. So what is the highest common factor? Common being the operative word here. Between 6 and 20? Well, I see we have 2. And we also have 2 there. So 2 has to be the highest common factor. So we're going to divide both the numerator and the denominator by the highest common factor. So basically, we have 3 over 10. And that's the simplest it can be. 3 over 10, you cannot simplify it any further. Okay, now we get to 20 and 40. All right, so I'm going to say with the factors of 20, I know that 20 is a factor of 40, all right? So I'm going to divide by 20 both on the numerator as well as the denominator. Okay, I don't need to go and check, what do you call this? I don't need to go and check the factors. But for you, if you are still struggling and if this is really a problem, then please go back and get the factors. Okay, so here I see with 20, actually, let me just do it with you if you're still struggling. For 20, we already have the factors. Let's look at 40. Okay, so we have 1 and 40. 2, what do we need to multiply it by? 20. 3, no. 4, yes. 4 and 10. 5, yes. What do we need to multiply it by? I think 8. All right. 6, no. 7, no. Yeah, so basically that's that. So the factors of 40 would be 1, 2, 4, 5, 8, 10, 20, and 40. So what are the common factors? So we have 2, we have 4, we have 5, we have 10, and we have 20. But what is the highest common factor? We can see there that the highest common factor is 20. So that is why I used 20. Now what is 20 divided by 20? We have 1. And what is 40 divided by 20? Well, 40 divided by 20 is 2. Okay, because we can see 2 times 20 gives you 40. And there it is, 1 over 2, which is a half. You cannot simplify it any further. It is at its simplest. What about 80 and 400? Okay, I know that 80 is a factor of 400. Remember, 8 times 5 is 40. Okay, so basically 80 times 5 will give me 400. All right, and Yeah, so I can then divide both the numerator and the denominator by 80 because I know that 80 is a common factor between 80 and 400. So I divide by 80 in the numerator, I divide by 80 in the denominator. Okay, let's just maybe learn how to extend that line so that it's not like things are just floating. So 80 divided by 80 is 1, and 400 divided by 80 will be 5. And ladies and gents, this is the simplest that it can become. All right. This is great. I hope you understood. Now let's look at exercise 1. So it says simplify the following and state whether they are the same or are different. So let us simplify for A. 8 over 16. Okay, what are the factors of 8? We have 1 and 8. I'm going to do this for A only, writing out the factors. Okay, then we have 2 and 4. And that's it for 8. What about 16? We have 1 and 16. Okay, let me just be consistent. We have 2 and 8. We also have 4 and 4. All right, so I can see that the highest common factor between 8 and 16 is actually 8. All right, so for 8 over 16, I will then say 8 divided by 8, 16 divided by 8, and I get a half. Right, and then what about 2 over 4? Well, I'm not going to go and put down the factors. That is an easy one. Let me just bubble this. All right, but basically 2 over 4, I know that 2 is the highest common factor, so I will say 2 divided by 2 over 4 divided by 2, and I get 1 over 2. And are they the same or different? They are definitely the same. All right, what about 18 over 24? Okay, so maybe here you need to write down the factors. Okay, so just by looking at it, I know 18. I have 1 and 18. I have 2 and 9, 3 and 6, and that's it. Okay, what about 24? 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 6 and 4. So what is the highest common factor here? I see it as 6. All right, so this is the working out that you do. You found the highest common factor, which is 6. I should have given myself more space over here. So I have 18 divided by 6 and 24 divided by 6, and I get 3 over 4. Now, 3 over 4, if you know it, it's actually 75%, which is 75 over 100. So both are the same. But let us go forward and see. With 75, I am going to divide 75 by 25. Okay, that is my highest common factor. Go and work it out and come back and tell me if you get 25 as your highest common factor for 75 and 100. Okay, so 75 divided by 25 is 3, and 100 divided by 25 is 4. So both are definitely the same. Now coming to the last question. All right, before we go over to mixed fractions, 10 over 20, the highest common factor there is 10. So I will then say 10 divided by 10 over 20 divided by 10. So I get 1 over 2. So it's a half. And looking at 8 over 40, I don't think I'll get a half. So I know that 8 is a factor of 40. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and divide 8 by 8 and say 40 divided by 8. So 8 divided by 8 is 1. 40 divided by 8 is 5. So a half and a fifth, definitely not the same. All right. So that is that. I hope at this point in time you are confident in simplifying these fractions. You see, fractions are not bad. Do not lose this stamina and this confidence when it comes to fractions. Now, let us go over to mixed fractions. You can take a break. I know I'm just going over this. I'm like running the sprint marathon. But yes, you can take a break and then come back to mixed fractions. Okay, we are back now. Mixed fractions, what are they? They are basically fractions that have a whole number. When you see something like this, so this is like three parts, and we have a quarter as well. Okay, when you see this, please do not stress. It's okay. It's okay. There's nothing really funny about this. This is what we call a mixed fraction. Some calculators allow you to put a mixed fraction, whereas others, don't really. If you have a Casio calculator, you can put in a mixed fraction. Now, while we're in the same breath of mixed fractions, what are improper fractions? So improper fractions are fractions that have a numerator larger than a denominator. In most cases, we've seen with fractions that the numerator is normally less than a denominator. Okay, back to my example of the chocolate. All right, what would make sense, now my chocolate has 6 pieces, okay? I mean, a whole would be 6/6, right? That's the maximum, because I can't look at this chocolate and then you tell me there's 7/6. What? Where's this extra coming from? The maximum I can have here is 6/6. And if I want one piece of the chocolate, I would take one of the 6 pieces. Okay, so generally the numerator is less than the denominator. So what would have happened for you now to get the denominator smaller than the numerator? Well, you would have had probably another chocolate somewhere. Okay, so there'll be an extra piece, and instead of writing it as a mixed fraction, so here let's say you have 3 chocolates, and these chocolates can be divided into 4 pieces, so that's the 3. All right, and then you have an extra piece here, that's 3 1/4. Okay, that's basically that. So you don't have only just one part or one whole, you have more than. All right, so now the nice thing about mixed fractions and improper fractions is that you can write the mixed fraction as an improper fraction, and you can also write an improper fraction as a mixed fraction. And there are rules in terms of how you can do that. So when you write mixed fractions as improper fractions, that's the first one we're going to look at. How would that work out? Okay, so when you write a mixed fraction as an improper fraction, let's go back to our example 3. Okay, actually no, we're going to do that as part of the examples. Let's just read the rule here so that we can go ahead and do the examples. So when you go from mixed to improper, what happens? Firstly, you multiply the denominator by the whole number, and then you add the numerator. So that's the first thing that we do, and you write that answer in your numerator. Now, what happens to the denominator? Well, you're going to keep the original denominator as the denominator of the improper fraction. For those of you who are like, ooh, the English is not Englishing now, let's do an example. Okay, so we have 3 wholes and 1/4. So how do I write that as an improper fraction? Well, multiply denominator, that's the 4, by the whole number, that is 3, and add the numerator, that is 1. And then what happens to the denominator? You keep it as it is. So let's do it. 4 times 3, that's 12, plus 1 is 13/4. Now you see why you end up getting a numerator bigger than the denominator, because we have an improper fraction. All right, we had 3 whole parts and 1/4. Cool. Now, let's go to the next example. Do the same thing again. Okay, multiply the denominator by what? By the whole number. And then you add the numerator. Okay, what happens to the denominator? The denominator stays the same. We don't do anything to it. We don't change it. So that's perfect. What is 7 times 2? That's 14. 14 plus 4. There you guessed it, 18. And there you went from changing a mixed fraction to an improper fraction. Well done. Now let's go over to getting the improper fraction back to a mixed fraction. What do you do then? So firstly, you will divide the numerator by the denominator because the numerator is now big, right? Oh yeah. And then you keep the whole number you get, okay? And make the remainder the numerator. And then lastly, you keep the original denominator as the denominator of the fraction. All right, if the English was not Englishing, let us do it together. Firstly, divide the numerator by the denominator. So if I were to have 10 divided by 4, how many times would 4 get into 10? It would only get in twice. Okay, then we have 8. What are we left with? 2. So 2, remainder 2. So keep the whole number you get. I got 2. And then make the remainder the numerator. The remainder was 2. Then keep the denominator as the denominator of the fraction. There we go. We went from improper fraction to a mixed fraction, just like that. Isn't that amazing? And in the second example, let's do it again. We're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. Okay, so 25 divided by 6. So how many times does 6 get into 25? Remember, the factors of 6, we have 6, 12, 18, 24, 30. So how many times does it get inside 25? It gets in 4 times. So 4. 4 times 6, 24, we're left with 1. So it's 4 remainder 1. So after dividing the numerator by the denominator, keep the whole number you get. What whole number did we get? 4. And then make the remainder the numerator, 1. And keep the original denominator as the denominator. And there we go, guys. There it is. Not so bad, right? Awesome. Now we're going to head over to adding and subtracting fractions. This is quite easy, but I promise you, if you don't grab this and run with it, hold it dear to your heart, you will forget and you'll start making stupid mistakes like I see with my grade 10s, 11s, and 12s. Grade 10s, 11s, and 12s, I know this is a lesson for grade 8s, but please come back here. Come back here because, wow, you are showing me flames. All right, so let's take a nice quick break and then get back to this. Welcome back from the break. While we're at it, please don't forget to like our videos and also subscribe to our channel. All right, so how then do we add or subtract fractions? So here I have some variables so that we can just go over some slight rules. Okay, when it comes to adding or subtracting fractions, if your denominator is the same, then that's great. What do I mean? There's nothing special that you're going to do. You're simply going to add the numerators. Okay, and the denominator remains the same. Same thing with subtracting. All right, the denominator is the same, so that's great. So we're just going to subtract the numerator. What happens though if the denominators are not the same? So you might have learned of a method of finding the highest common factor or the lowest common factor. But I'm just going to give you a simple rule that works regardless. Okay, let me use a different colored pen. So firstly, we are going to multiply the denominators. So we have b times d. And that is your denominator. And then what you're going to do, you're going to multiply, cross multiply. Okay, so a will be multiplied by d. So we just have ad. And then b will be multiplied by c. And because we are adding, we put an addition sign. Okay, let's go over it again. What do? You multiply the denominators. Okay, so b times d. Then you cross multiply a times d, b times c, and because we have a subtraction sign, we put a subtraction sign over there. All right, that only happens when you have different denominators. If it's the same denominator, you can just go ahead, add the numerators, subtract the numerators, keep the same denominators. If we are adding or subtracting different denominators, then we first multiply the denominators, then we cross multiply. Okay, don't forget it. We just go straight. Okay, so now let's do some examples. And if you have this, if you got this, then things become a lot easier. Okay, if you remember this, even up to matric, when you are using different variables, because you get to do trigonometry, but it's still a fraction. You still apply the same rules. So if you know these rules, you can apply them all the way till you're working, if you're continuing in the math space. All right. I know there are calculators, but in the real world, we deal more with variables, with unknowns. All right. So let's deal with adding there. We have 1/4 and 3/4. What do I realize? I realize that the denominators are the same. So I'm just going to put the same denominator there. And then I just add the numerators, right? So I have 4/4, which is simply 1 if we simplify it. Okay. And then B. All right. So now we have different denominators. Remember what I said when you have different denominators? You're first going to multiply the denominators. So we have 5 times 4. And then we're going to cross multiply. I'm going to have 1 times 4. And I'm going to have 5 times 1 when I cross multiply. And then I add. All right. So what is 1 times 4? That is 4. 5 times 1, that is just 5. And 5 times 4 is 20. So then finally I have 9/20 as my answer. Okay. I hope that went well. You can repeat it again if you missed something. Now we're adding a mixed fraction. Okay, so we need to change this mixed fraction to an improper fraction. Do you remember how to do that? I sure hope you do. So we're going to multiply the 5 and the 4. Okay. And we're going to add the numerator. And remember, you leave the denominator as is. The nice thing I'm seeing here is that the denominators are the same. So once I'm done simplifying the first fraction, it'll be easier to add. So now I have 5 times 4, which is 20, plus 1, that's 21/4. And I have 2/4. That's great. I have the same denominator. So my calculation is quite simple. I'm going to say 21 plus 2. And when I simplify it, I have 23/4. I cannot simplify it any further because 23 is a prime number. There aren't any other factors. So the only factor there is just 1 and 23. Okay, so the highest common factor is 1. So I'm going to leave it at that. All right, what about the next fraction? I see that I have an improper fraction. Great. Please do not change it to a mixed fraction. You're going to complicate your life. Leave it as an improper fraction. So yeah, another thing. If you have mixed fractions, change them to improper fractions. You want to work with an improper fraction, or else you're going to confuse yourself with a mixed fraction. All right. So over here, we have an improper fraction. How do I know? The numerator is bigger than the denominator. Thank you. So what do? We multiply the denominator. So I have 4 times 6. And then we cross multiply. I have 1 times 6. And I have 4 times 5. Sorry, 4 times 15. Okay. So now what is 4 times 6? I have 24. What is 1 times 6? That is simply 6. 4 times 15 will give me 60. So yeah, and we're adding here, right? Okay. So now 60 plus 6, that will be 66, and I have 24. I can definitely simplify over here. Okay, so you'll have to think about it, like what are the factors of 66? I have 1 and 66, 2 and 33, 3 and 22. 4, can it be divisible by 4? I don't know. I really don't know. I need to check on the calculator, or I can just calculate it quickly. So these are the things where you're like, oh my gosh. Okay. No, not really divisible by 4, so 4 is not a factor. And then 5, definitely not. 6, yes, I'll have 6 and 11. And I think that is that. What about the factors of 24? Okay, I'm going to have to, this is all the working out that you do, just looking for space. So 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. All right, and I think that is that. So the highest common factor I am finding here, that I'm seeing, is actually 6. So if I then take 66 and divide it by 6, I get 11. And 24 divided by 6, that is going to be 4. So that is my answer, 11 over 4. And if they had asked you to write it as a mixed fraction, you can definitely do this. Actually, what is the answer that you get? Please write in the comment below. I would like to hear what answer, oh, not hear, but actually see if you remember how to do mixed fractions. So please write down your answer in the comment below. Now let us go over to subtraction. Okay, still quite a few of them. So I have a half minus a quarter. Okay, I see the denominators are not the same. So I'm going to say 2 times 4, and that is 8. And I'm going to say 1 times 4, that is 4, minus 2 times 1, that's 2. So my answer, 4 minus 2 is 2 over 8. I can simplify it. My highest common factor here is 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Now next, we're going to rush through the rest. All right. Again, different denominators. Okay. So you can say, why don't you just get the lowest common denominator? Lowest common multiple. No, we're just going to use this one rule. Multiply the denominators. We get 18, right? 6 times 3. Cross multiply. 15, 5 times 3, and 6 times 2 is 12. So I can subtract there. What's 15 minus 12? That is 3 over 18. And 3 is the highest common factor. If I divide 3 by 3, I get 1. 18 divided by 3 is 6. Okay. Now we have an improper a mixed fraction. So what are we going to do? To get it to an improper fraction, 5 times 4 is 20. 20 plus 2 is 22. And then we leave the denominator as it is. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 plus 1 is 9 over 4. All right, I have the same denominator, so that is great. Now I can say 22 minus 9. What is 22 minus 9? I believe that is 11. No. Yes, why am I doubting myself? Maybe not 11, 12. Probably. Oh my gosh. I don't know what 22 minus 9 is. 22 minus 10 would have been 12. So it's 13. Yes, 13. My goodness. My word. Who needs to go back and do maths again? So 13 over 4. That is 22 minus 9. All right. Now let's get to another question. We have an improper fraction, 9 over 4, because the numerator is bigger than the denominator. But I see that my denominators are not the same. So I'm going to say, what is 4 times 6? That is 24. 9 times 6. Oh, I need to think now. So 6 times 8, 54. Yeah. 6 times 8 is 48. 48 plus 6 is 54. And then 4 times 1 is 4. And we are adding. All right. So what is 54 plus 4? That is 58 over 24. Okay, now I need to think. What would be the highest common factor? All right. So I'm just going to divide by 2 until I get to an answer. So 58 divided by 2, If I divide by 2, at the top and the bottom, let's see. Okay, so what is 58 divided by 2? I think that is 29. And 24 divided by 2, that is 12. Okay, yeah, so it's just 29 over 12. You can't simplify it any further, but we have an improper fraction. So again, I ask you, what is the mixed fraction? Let's do this one together. So remember, 29 divided by 12, 12 goes only twice, right? And what does it leave? So 2 times 12 is 24. You're going to have 5 as a remainder. And then, there we go. So that was it with adding and subtracting fractions. Now, when it comes to multiplying and dividing fractions, actually, this for me, I feel like it's much easier than adding and subtracting. And you'll see why I say that. All right, so when you multiply fractions, you multiply the numerators together in order to get a new numerator, and you're going to multiply the denominators together in order to get a new denominator. And that's it. That's it. It's not like adding or subtracting fractions with different denominators. That one got a little bit tricky, but this one is straightforward and you're going to enjoy it. So let's go ahead. I'm going to multiply 1 and 1 in the numerator, and I'm going to multiply 3 and 4 in the denominator. So 1 times 1 is 1, 3 times 4 is 12. And we are done. That's it when it comes to multiplying fractions. And the next one, multiply the numerators, 5 times 2. Multiply the denominator, 7 times 4. So what is 5 times 2? It is 10. And what is 7 times 4? That's 28. Can we simplify further? I believe we can. So the factors of 10, we have 1, we have 2, we have 5, we have 10. So let's divide by 2. Okay, because I can divide by 2 on the numerator as well as denominator. So 10 divided by 2, that is 5. And 28 divided by 2, that is 14. And that's it. We cannot simplify any further. Now we have improper fractions. So again, 5 times 4, that is 20. 20 plus 2, that's 22. Sorry, did I say improper fractions? I meant mixed fractions. We're going to make them improper. All right. So what is 2 times 4? That is 8. 8 plus 1 is 9. And that is all over 4. Now we can go ahead and multiply freely. All right. So multiply. Let's actually do it on this side. I didn't give myself space. So now I have 22 times 9. And I have 4 times 4. Okay. What is 22 times 9? I don't know that off the back of my head. So 2 times 9 is 18. Again, 18 plus 1, that's 19. All right. So we have 198 over 16. I'm sure you can get this answer to be simplified. What are the factors of 16? Okay, you tell me. You tell me, what is 198 over 16 in a simplified form? Okay, so simplify it. And when you are done, also comment below and tell me what the mixed fraction is. Okay. So now let's do the last question. So we have an improper fraction and a normal fraction. So it's going to be 9 times 2. And at the bottom we have 4 times 6. So 9 times 2 is 18. 4 times 6 is 24. All right. So if I were to use 6 as my highest common factor, I divide by 6. 18 divided by 6, I get 3. 24 divided by 6, I get 4. So I have 3/4. All right. Now, I'm so tempted to go back to this calculation. Let's do it. Let's try it. Let's simplify it. Okay. So the factors of 16, I'm going to just write it in a different colored pen somewhere there. We have 1 and 16. We have 2 and 8. We have 4 and 4. And what I want to do, I want to determine 198. Can I divide it by 8?
if I can, then that would be great. So 8 goes into 19 twice, so I'm left with 16. So 19 minus, no, 8 doesn't work. What other one can I try? Would 4 work? Let's see. I don't know, I don't think so, but let's see. 4 goes into 19 4 times, then we have 6. No, still doesn't work because I'm gonna have 38, and no, so 4 doesn't work. So let's try 2. Okay, 198 divided by 2. So 19 divided by 2 is like what? 9. So 9 times 2, I have 18. Then I subtract there. So 18 divided by 2 is 9. Alright, so as having simplified it, we can then say the highest common factor would be 2. So I have 99, and then 16 divided by 2 is 8. Alright, I cannot simplify it further. Now what I can do, in order to write it in a mixed fraction form, I need to say what is 99 divided by 8. So it will go in once. 9 divided by 8, 8 goes in once. I'm left with 19. 19 divided by 8, it goes there twice. 2 times 8, 16. And we have remainder 3. All right, so basically that will be 12, and that's my remainder, and that's over 8. So if you got that, pat yourself on the shoulder and be proud. Yes. Listen, please just only get it to a mixed fraction if they wanted it. If they didn't ask for it, you can leave it in a simplified improper fraction. Now, lastly, what happens when we divide fractions? Okay, it's also not bad. It has a little trick to it, but afterwards, it just goes perfectly. So, firstly, you must leave the fraction before the division sign unchanged. Okay, so for example, this is the fraction before the division sign. We don't change that, we leave it as it is. Now, replace the division sign with a multiplication sign. Let's do it as we speak. So we leave a half as it is, replace the division sign with a multiplication sign. Reciprocate the second fraction. All right, reciprocate meaning swap the numerator and the denominator for the second fraction. Maybe that's what I should say. Maybe if I use the word reciprocate, it might be a bit, a bit difficult. Now I'm saying swap. Swap the numerator and denominator in the second fraction or of the second fraction. Okay, now I'm swapping it. And then multiply the first fraction with the reciprocal of the second fraction. So now we're back to multiplication, guys, and this is where it becomes easy, because when you multiply fractions, you multiply the numerators, then you multiply the denominators, and then your final answer is 4 over 2. If you simplify it, 4 divided by 2 is what? 2, or 2 over 1, which is just 2. Now let's get to the second example. You leave the first fraction as it is. You change the division sign to a multiplication sign. You reciprocate, or you swap the denominator and the numerator, and then you multiply as normal. 5 times 3 over 6 times 2. What's 5 times 3? It's 15. 6 times 2 is 12. So there you have an improper fraction. If you really want to turn it to a mixed fraction, we can say 15 divided by 12 is going to be 1. What are we going to leave behind? 3. So 3 over 12. Okay. And then we do see we have a mixed fraction. Remember, it's always a good idea, always, not sometimes, always, a good idea to change the mixed fraction to an improper fraction. So 2 times 4, that is 8. Multiply, and then we add. And 8 plus 2, that is 10. So we have 10 over 4 divided by 5 times 4 is 20. 20 plus 1 is 21. Okay, we leave the first fraction, we change the multiplication sign, we swap the numerator and the denominator, and then we can go ahead and multiply. So 10 times 4 is 40. 4 times 21 is 84. We can simplify this, no? We definitely can. If you divide by 4, firstly, you're going to get 10, and then you're going to get 21. All right, so that's it. Now let's go to D. Okay, you leave the first fraction, you turn the division sign into a multiplication sign, you swap the numerator and denominator, and you go ahead and multiply. So that's 3 times 6 over 4 times 1. What is 3 times 6? 18, and 4 times 1 is simply 4. If you use 2 as your highest common factor, you're going to get 9 over 2. Okay, so you have an improper fraction. 9 over 2 is like 4.5. Okay, remember we're going to say 9 divided by 2. You're going to get 4. 4 times 2 is 8, so you have remainder 1. 1, and yeah, so 4.5. Alrighty, and that is it. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did. I am passionate about fractions. I hope you felt the passion in the lesson, and I really hope you do not forget these essential tricks and hints and yeah, the lesson in general. Thank you and all the best with your term 1 test.